It took one letter for the 3 kids I raised from diapers to tell me I didn't belong in their lives anymore. My name is Denise Carter. I'm 51. Until 6 months ago, I ran an event planning company out of Atlanta that I built from one folding card table and a laptop set up in my dining room. Now, let me back up. I met Marcus Carter when I was 29, doing the flowers for a wedding where he worked security. He had 3 kids at home and a look on his face like a man drowning quietly. Terrence was 4. Aisha was 3. Malik was barely walking. Their mother, Yolanda Price, had left 11 months before I ever showed up. No note, just a duffel bag missing from the closet. I never adopted them. Marcus always said there was no need, that I was already their mother in every way that counted. I believed him. That matters later. My grandmother raised me the same way she ran her kitchen, with a ledger and a scuffed silver pen, the cap held on with a rubber band. Write it down, she used to say. Everything. Write it down. I still use that pen. I used it the day I signed away my company for $4.2 million, sitting at a conference table with my attorney, Pauline Whitfield, telling me to read every line twice. I remember driving home that day thinking I'd finally built something nobody could take from me. Yolanda came back 6 weeks later. She showed up at Terrence's apartment in a car too new for a woman who hadn't paid a dime of support in 22 years, and she cried about all the time she'd lost. Terrence called me that night, and I could hear something soft in his voice that hadn't been there before. She wants to make things right, Denise. I said okay. I meant it. I've never been the kind of woman who stands between grown children and their blood mother. I didn't know yet how fast making things right would turn into something else. Aisha stopped answering my calls first. Then Malik, who I talked to every Sunday since he left for the army, went quiet for 2 weeks. When he finally called back, he asked me a question that took the air clean out of my chest. Denise, did you ever actually adopt us? Like legally? I told him no. The way I always had. The way it had never mattered before. He got quiet and said he had to go. 3 weeks after that, a letter came. Typed. Sitting in my mailbox between the water bill and a magazine. All 3 of their names signed at the bottom in ink. They'd decided, as a family, that it was time for me to step back. Real mother. 2 words, and 22 years of packed lunches and school plays folded up small enough to fit in an envelope. I read it 4 times before Marcus got home. When he saw my face, then the letter, he didn't pick it up right away. He just stood there. And that's when I noticed he wasn't surprised. You knew, I said, still holding the envelope. He didn't deny it. He said Yolanda had changed, that she was sober now, steady, and deserved a chance without me standing in the middle. I asked him what that meant. Me, in the middle, in my own house with my own children. He didn't answer that part. I want to tell you it started right there. It didn't. It started earlier, small enough that I let it go. 6 months before the sale closed, Marcus asked me to sign paperwork making him a consulting advisor for Carter Premier Events. For tax purposes, he said. I signed it without reading closely, because 23 years of marriage doesn't usually make you read the fine print on your own husband. That was the first sign. I explained it away before I even finished folding the paper. Then for a while things got better than they'd been in years. Marcus started coming to the office on Fridays, bringing coffee, asking real questions about vendor contracts and staffing. He told me he was proud of what I'd built. He meant it, or he sounded like he meant it, and after 23 years I still couldn't always tell the difference. I let my guard down completely that spring. I remember thinking we'd made it through the hard years and out the other side. 2 weeks after the letter, I came home from lunch with Pauline to find a manila envelope on the counter with my name on it. Divorce papers. Filed through a lawyer I'd never heard of. Irreconcilable differences after 23 years. With no note and no conversation. Just papers. The same way Yolanda had left 22 years before, except this time she wasn't the one walking out the door. I called Pauline that night. My hands shook too hard to hold the phone steady the first 2 tries. She asked me one question before anything else. Denise, when you signed the papers for the sale, whose name was on the buyer's agreement? Just yours or both of yours? I sat there in my kitchen, in the house I'd lived in for 20 years, and realized I honestly didn't remember. And somewhere in that silence, I understood this wasn't a family falling apart on its own. Somebody had been building toward this for a lot longer than 6 weeks. Pauline came to my house the next morning with a folder instead of just her phone. That told me before she said a word that this was worse than I'd let myself think. I pulled the closing documents, she said, sitting across from me at the same kitchen table, where I'd read that letter 4 times. Your name only, Denise. Sole owner, sole seller. Marcus isn't on the buyer's agreement, the escrow, or the transfer of ownership. That part's clean. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Pauline didn't look relieved, and my stomach dropped right back down. The problem isn't the sale, she said. It's the post-nup you signed in 2011. I remembered it, barely. Marcus had asked me to sign it during a rough patch, back when the business was worth maybe $60,000 or $70,000 if you squinted. It said any business I owned would stay my separate property in a divorce. At the time it felt like protection. A post-nup protects the asset from being split, Pauline said. It doesn't protect you from a husband deciding he wants a piece of it through other means. Think back. Did he ever ask you to sign anything, add him to anything in the last year? And then I remembered. The consulting paperwork. 6 months before the sale. Signed without reading, because I trusted him. Pauline's face told me the rest before she said it. That paperwork gave him a documented financial tie to the business. Not ownership, but enough for a good lawyer to argue he'd contributed during the marriage, especially if the business grew while he was advising. That's why he waited until after the sale to file, she said quietly. Nothing to fight over yet, if he files early. 23 years, and somewhere in there, my own husband had been laying groundwork. That same week Aisha called. Not to apologize. To ask carefully, almost reading from a script, whether I'd settle things quickly so everyone could move forward. I asked her straight out if Yolanda had put her up to it. She got quiet, then admitted it. Said Yolanda thought it would be easier on everybody. Said the kids deserved something for the years they'd missed with their real mother. That word again. I hung up and called my cousin Renata Simmons, who works in forensic accounting out of a firm in Decatur. I asked her, off the books, to look into Yolanda. Public records only. What Renata found 2 weeks later changed everything. Yolanda wasn't sober and stable the way she'd told the kids. She'd filed for bankruptcy 18 months before showing up at Terrence's door. The steady job was a part-time call center position she'd been let go from 4 months earlier. The new car wasn't paid for. It was leased, co-signed by a man named Curtis Boyd. Curtis Boyd was Marcus's divorce attorney's paralegal. I stared at that name on Renata's printout for a long time before it clicked into place. I pulled the closing folder out again myself that night, just to look at my own signature on the sale. The same scuffed pen from my grandmother, cap held on with a rubber band, sitting right there on the table beside it. I ran my thumb over the ink. Write it down. I could hear her saying it. I'd written every single thing down for 20 years without knowing it would matter this much. I brought everything to Pauline. She went quiet reading through it, then said the words I needed to hear. This isn't a woman who came back for her kids, Denise. This is a woman who came back because somebody told her there was money on the table, and she needed a way in. We didn't have proof yet that Marcus and Yolanda had planned this together from the start. What we had was a pattern, timing, financial desperation, a shared contact. Enough for Pauline to build a strategy. Not enough to hand the kids and expect them to believe me over their own mother. So I didn't go to the kids yet. Pauline and I built something quieter instead. She filed a motion for full financial disclosure from Marcus. Bank statements, correspondence, anything tied to his consulting role. Under Georgia law, once that motion goes through, he'd have to hand it over whether he wanted to or not. 3 weeks into waiting, an email landed in my inbox. An old shared cloud folder Marcus had never removed my access from, used for tax documents years back. Sitting in it, dated 4 months before the sale even closed, was a message thread between Marcus and Yolanda. I read the first line and had to sit down. Once it sells, we just need the kids on our side. Denise built it, but Georgia law isn't as clean as she thinks when marriage and business mix. We move fast before she gets a full-time lawyer looking at everything. For months. He'd been planning this with her 4 months before that letter ever touched my mailbox. I sat holding my phone with both hands shaking, and for the first time since this started, I wasn't sad anymore. I was something colder and steadier than that. I forwarded the thread to Pauline without writing a single word. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. 4 words. "Denise, call me now. Read me every word of that thread again," she said. Slow. I did. When I finished, she was quiet for a second, then said the calmest thing anyone had said to me in weeks. "This changes the entire posture of this case. Don't respond to him. Don't respond to Yolanda. Don't respond to the kids. Send me everything and let me work." The next 6 weeks were the longest of my life, and also the quietest, because for once I wasn't fighting alone in the dark. Pauline used the thread to expand the disclosure motion. This time Marcus's attorney couldn't slow-walk it. The records came back and confirmed everything. The consulting agreement had never involved a single hour of actual work. No meetings. No invoices. Just a signature, sitting there for one purpose, dated 6 months before the sale. I was there the day Pauline argued the motion. Not required to be. I went anyway. Marcus sat across the room in a gray suit I didn't recognize. When the judge read the consulting agreement aloud and asked his attorney to produce a single work product tied to it, nobody had an answer. The silence in that room said more than any dialogue could have. He caught me in the hallway after. "You didn't have to make this ugly," he said. I looked at him a second before I answered. "I didn't make it ugly, Marcus. You and Yolanda made it ugly 4 months before I ever knew about it. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." He started to walk off. I let him get 3 steps. "Say it," I said. "Just once. Tell me you planned this with her before any of it happened." He stopped. Didn't turn around right away. When he did, his eyes were red in a way I hadn't seen since his mother's funeral. "I panicked," he said. "I saw that number on the sale and I panicked, and Yolanda made it sound simple. Get the kids close to her. Get some kind of claim on the business before you had time to protect it. I told myself it wasn't really hurting you. I knew that was a lie the whole time I was telling it to myself. 23 years, Marcus." "I know." His voice broke on the second word. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to hear me say it was wrong from me, instead of a court file." I didn't say anything back. There wasn't anything left to say that would change what it cost. I walked past him, out of the courthouse, into a parking lot full of afternoon light. I didn't look back to see if he watched me go. The judge ruled 2 weeks later. The Post-Nup already protected Carter Premier Events as separate property. The fabricated consulting role meant Marcus's claim didn't survive summary judgment. The business stayed mine. His attorney withdrew 2 weeks after that. Curtis Boyd left the firm around the same time. I hadn't spoken to Terrence, Aisha, or Malik in almost 4 months. That silence broke on a Tuesday evening, when Aisha showed up at my door alone. The way she used to at 17 when she needed to talk about something she didn't want her father to hear. "Is it true?" she asked, still standing on the porch. "That Daddy and her planned this before the letter?" "Ask your father," I said. "And if he won't tell you straight, ask Pauline for the record. It's part of the court file now. You have every right to see it." She came back 3 days later with Terrence and Malik. Malik went first. Didn't even sit down. "I asked you if you legally adopted us. I hate that I asked you that." His voice cracked on the last word, the same way it used to when he was 7 and trying not to cry in front of his brother. Terrence apologized for the letter, plain and short, the way he's always talked. Aisha didn't say much of anything. She sat on my couch and cried, and I let her, because some things don't need narration. What came out that evening, and the ones after, was that Yolanda had told all 3 of them a version where I was the one who'd kept them from her. It only worked as long as nobody checked it against anything real. Once the disclosure records became part of the case, that story stopped holding up. Not to kids smart enough to read a court filing themselves. Yolanda never faced criminal charges. Nothing about the plan itself broke the law. The consequences landed on Marcus, through family court, not on her. But her relationship with the kids didn't survive the truth. Last I heard, Aisha had moved to Alabama. Nobody's heard from her since. The divorce finalized 4 months ago. Marcus and I split what was left of a marriage that spent its last few years being quietly taken apart by someone I trusted completely. I bought a smaller house closer to Aisha, with a guest room that stays made up now, because Malik comes through more than he used to, and Terrence brings his daughter over on Sundays. I keep my grandmother's old pen in the kitchen drawer, cap still held on with that same rubber band. I don't use it for ledgers anymore. Mostly I just know it's there. I didn't get back 22 years. I got 3 grown people who chose, after seeing the truth for themselves, to come back to the woman who actually raised them. I never adopted them on paper. I understand now that was never the thing that made me their mother. And it was never the thing that could take it away either. Blood tells you who someone came from. It doesn't tell you who stayed. If you've ever been the one who stayed while someone else got called the real one, tell me about it below. I read every single comment.